All right. Welcome, everybody, to how to enhance your workflows with Bublup for accountants and bookkeepers. Joining with me today is Grace Taylor, who works at Bublup. So she's going to be helping us especially explore some of the more advanced features and features that I'm not as familiar with. So everybody give Grace a nice warm welcome, loud round of applause, golf clap, whatever you do. And then for those of you wondering, the people who are in here as participants are members of 97 and up. So that is who is being brought in as participants. And you can certainly join 97 and up if you'd like to be a participant or a panelist, rather, on our upcoming webinars. And we'll talk more about that at the end. In fact, if you stick around to the end, we've got a couple of things that I think you'll be interested in. Grace has a coupon code to give you that will get you a month of a pro account with Bublup so that you can try all the features out and test them out for a month and see if it's something that you'd like to continue with. And then I've got, for those who aren't members of 97 and up, an offer that will hopefully make it difficult to say no. Anyway, on with the subject du jour, Bublup, how to enhance your workflows with Bublup. The first thing I think of when I consider taking on a new app, and this was certainly the case a few years back, actually, when I first stumbled on Bublup. I don't even remember how I saw it. I think it was just the whole visual nature of it caught my eye. I might have seen a video or something. Or no, actually, it was somebody in a group that I was part of mentioned it as a tool that she used for productivity. And I went and checked it out because she had shared a screenshot of it. It's funny, I remember this now. And I thought that just looked really cool. So I had to check it out. And then when I look at something, I ask myself, a few questions here. Does it solve a problem I don't already have solved? These days, as I've been at this for so long, oftentimes the answer is no. Does it solve one better? I won't know that necessarily until I played around with it a little bit, very likely. But so that brings up the third category, which is that it doesn't at least immediately fall into the previous two, but it's an app that looks so appealing that I just want to explore and maybe find use cases for it. And so I call that the sandbox. I want to play with it and find out if it maybe won't solve a problem better. And a big one that Bublup solved for me more recently, because I had, case in point, when I started playing with Notion, I had no intention of replacing ClickUp, but eventually the more I dug into Notion, the more I really liked working with it and saw how I could sort of bend it to my will and get it to do what I wanted to do very easily once I understood how to use it. Little by little, I did end up replacing ClickUp with Notion, and that became my preference. So it fell under the second category of does it solve one better? So Bublup initially fell under the category of, that last category of things I'd like to play with because I'd like to find use cases for it because just at first glance, it was just a really cool looking app. So kudos, Grace. You guys developed a really nice app that just visually drew me in and got my attention, right?
Our goal.
So, and just to kind of illustrate a case in point with this, around the time I originally started playing with Bublup, it was a few years back, and I was hired by Intuit through one of their PR companies to do a video shoot. And it was like a 4-day video shoot we were going to be doing. And so ahead of time, the PR company wanted me to show them pictures of outfits that I could wear each day of the shoot. And they had some criteria, they wanted shirts that were like solid in color, darker, those kinds of things usually show up better on video. So what I did was I created a folder in Bublup, which I shared with them. And then I took photos of different outfits that I laid out on a chair behind me. And I uploaded those to this folder in Bublup so I could let them take a look. And the beautiful thing, and you'll see this about Bublup, is they were able to get in there and comment on each of the different ones and say, yeah, we like this one. No, we don't like that one as much, and so on. And it just made it so easy to collaborate and give them what they really needed, which was something very visual. And eventually one of them just kind of asked me like, hey, what's this tool you're using, right? And that's how you know you've got something that kind of falls under the heading of what I call a program of attraction, right? I didn't have to promote it at all. I just used it with them and they got curious. So that's one of the things that will definitely draw me into an app is when it's like that. It's a program of attraction. It doesn't even have to be promoted because you just look at it, you start interacting with it, and you're like, this is cool. I've got to find a way to use this thing if it's not already very clear, right? And so a lot of the questions that people asked during live registration were, of course, I expected, is Bublup going to replace, my ClickUp or Asana or whatever I'm using for what I call work management? And the answer is, and I'll mention this again in another couple of minutes, it could if your situation is simple enough, but more likely, and the reason I titled this webinar with the word enhance your workflows, or the phrase, is that it will more likely enhance your workflows rather than replace what you're already using, right? And I'll get into examples of what I mean and why I feel that way, right? But let's start with the very first thing, which is the Bublup's sharing and collaboration capabilities. One of the things, and here's where we get into that area of it solves a problem better. With Notion's web clipping tool, which you can see on my screenshot, it's right next to the Bublup one that I'm pointing your attention at. When I click on that, I have very limited visibility into what I'm doing and where I'm sharing it. And I kind of have to know exactly where I want it to go, or I have to set up a default location. With Bublup, they by default have an option that I love because most of the time I don't have time to figure out where I want it. I just want it to go somewhere that I know I'm going to be able to find it later so I can, review it, right? Which of course means I have to have that in my process that later on today I'm going to go review whatever I put to save to review later, right? So to illustrate an example of this, let me go over to, I have to get out of full screen mode here. And I'm going to go over here. Let's say I wanted to bookmark my blog. Let's say you wanted to bookmark my blog. Then you would install the Bublup extension, right? And then down here, save to review later. Now, if I know exactly where I want to put it and I feel like taking the time to navigate it that way, I can do that. I can just say save here, and it will give me a nice, easy to follow dialog where I have a good detailed view. And I can even use the search here if I know quickly there's a folder I want to put this in specifically. But if not, or even once I'm here, if I say, you know what, screw it, I don't want to take the time, I just click here, review later, and I know I'm done. And I can safely close this browser tab without having to worry about losing my place, right? So that is one of the first things that I love about Bublup is clipping stuff on the web is very important to me because I'm constantly researching things, different apps, articles that I'm reading for purposes of learning, right? So it's actually a pretty big deal to me to have a tool that gives me an easy way to do what I just showed you, to bookmark anything that's on the web and know that it's in a place where I'll be able to find it later when I'm ready to either organize it or just work with it, right? So that's kind of the first thing right there. What's next? Before I even get into what's next, by the end of this webinar, here's what I want you to understand. I want you to have the basics and the key features of Bublup. I want you to have some ideas for things that you want to do with it right away. You've got my affiliate link up on the screen. I'm going to put it in the chat for you so that you don't have to sit there trying to figure out how to type all that, right? And then you can, join Bublup. They pay me $1 million for every referral. So I'm going to get very wealthy, right? No, I'm kidding, of course. What it does, and you should take advantage of this too, is I get some extra storage space included in my Bublup account up to, I think there's a limit to it. But am I right, Grace? There's you get extra storage up to some ceiling?
Yes. So for every person you refer, and this goes for anyone, and I can show you at the end how to find your referral link, you will get 5 gigabytes of storage per person up to 100 gigs. And this is in addition to whatever plan you already have.
Right. So actually, I'll do it right now so I can get mine for everybody. Might as well, right? So I'm going to go over here to menu, I believe it is, right? Or it's my info.
My info, and then rewards and referrals at the top. Yep.
There we go. So I'm going to
and you can see everyone that you've ever referred previously. You can see all your rewards to date. So you can see that Seth's been very busy.
91 users I've referred. So, and that's the magic of sending out emails that include that affiliate link so that when people want to check it out, they can. And then lots of people go check it out. So there it is. So everybody's got the link in the chat. You can click on it. If you don't already have a Bublup account, I'll get the credit for sending you. I'm probably at the max, if not close to the max storage space. I don't do this for that, obviously. I do this because I'm doing a whole webinar on it because I love this application, right? All right, onward. So what is Bublup, right? That's a fair question. What is it? Okay, so I mean, there's a lot of things. One person, I think it was you, Alexa, who asked if, how this compared to Pinterest. And there's definitely some overlap as far as, on the surface, with Pinterest, I'm kind of bookmarking things on the web and I can put them on different boards, and I can even make private boards on Pinterest. So there's definitely a lot of sort of similarities, but Pinterest to me is a social network, whereas Bublup is more of an information management tool. So there's a lot of things I would do in Bublup that I would never do with Pinterest because it's too open. It's too sort of available to the public. Even with a private board and having that capability, there's things I still wouldn't do in Pinterest, would never do in Pinterest that I would definitely do with Bublup. And as you're going to see throughout the rest of the hour, where you're going to see how with Bublup, with Pinterest, each board kind of stands on its own. Whereas with Bublup, everything's sort of integrated and connected and easily linked and so on and so forth. So, so there's a lot of kind of differences between the two. I always forget to, excuse me, enable the chat for everyone. Let me fix that really quick. So attendees can chat with everyone. All right, poof, you can all use the chat. And you can use the Q&A as well. The chat is probably better for just chatter, like chime in and tell everybody where you're calling in from. If you have questions, use the Q&A. It'll be easier for us to track, especially if the chat itself gets very active. And then I'll just mention that I've answered that one. All right, so again, Bublup is an information management tool. And for that matter, I like to describe it as a very visual information management tool. That's my favorite way to that. How would you describe it, Grace? You being the person from the company, how would you describe what Bublup is to somebody who knows nothing?
Yes, I think you described it very well. We put a large emphasis on being visually appealing, easy to understand. It's basically a cloud storage platform and an organizational tool.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that about cloud storage, because you can store files there in a place that, as you'll see later on, is very visual, which when it comes to sharing this kind of stuff with clients, that's one of the big things you're going to love, I think, Bublup for. I can easily share files with clients in Notion, but it's much more visual. It's much more attractive, let's put it that way, if I do it with Bublup, right? So again, your primary work management tool, you can use this if you have a very simple setup. And in Bublup, you can create checklists that you can check off to confirm that you've done things. So if you have very simple needs, you have a small accounting firm and you have very simple clients and very simple sort of work that you need to manage for those clients, then you can certainly use Bublup as your entire work management tool. And I know some companies, I believe a lot of companies actually do use Bublup exclusively as their primary work management tool. So it's certainly possible to do that. But like I said, because I know a lot of you, in most of your cases, it's going to be sort of an enhancement, to your current setup, whatever you're using for work management, right? The primary superpower, as I've got on my screen here, is the interface. And it's extremely visual, as I've mentioned already a few times. And it's also very easy to find things. And, if I'm going to spend a lot of time in a tool, I don't really mention this when I mention the major 3 criteria, but a big criteria for me when I'm using an app is I want it to be very visual. If I'm going to spend a lot of my time all day, every day in a tool, it does need to be visually appealing, right? Especially when we talk about, accountants like us who spend most of our day looking at spreadsheets and balance sheets and income statements all day, even that, I feel like, like I always take the time. Some of you have seen when I've done my Google Sheets webinars that I really take the time to design those spreadsheets and make them pretty to look at. There's nothing I hate more than having somebody send me a spreadsheet that's just black and white and like just a wall of numbers and, border lines and things. And, it's like, ugh, I got to stop and really study this thing to make sure I understand what I'm meant to be looking at here, right? So the question is, please clarify folders versus web using bookkeeping and advisory use. I'm not sure I understand what you mean, folders versus web. So this is an entirely web-based tool, and you'll see you can create folders in it to put things in, but maybe I'm not understanding the question correctly. So Dominique, if you want to clarify that, I'll come back. So, and speaking of, let's look at some of the primary features and functionalities, right? And starting with, and I've got the screenshot for you that shows you what the home page looks like. The coloring and stuff is based on my settings, and it's kind of branded for Nerd Enterprises. Very, very easy to, change those settings. If I go to my live Bublup account here, you can see it still looks the same. There's a few new things here. But the first thing is across the top, I have recent, which is going to show me anything I've activated or gone into recently. Favorites is I can obviously add things to my favorites for the things I want to be able to access quickly or frequently. Shared with me is just that. It's when somebody else has shared something from their Bublup account with me. There's review later, which you've already seen. It's the stuff that I save there, right? There's my bookmark. And then there's emails, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and this is one of the big draws that kind of recently got me back into Bublup, was Notion doesn't have a good solution at all for forwarding emails that I need to follow up on. And this solved that problem. I can forward it into Bublup and get these really nicely rendered PDFs. And then I can simply get a shareable link and copy that link back into my task in Notion in 2 seconds so that I have what I need when I need it, as far as, if somebody sent me a detailed email with lots of things that I need to reference while I'm working on that project or task, right? So that's the quick lay of the land. Then I've got folders that I've created, right? So these are like your system sections. And then I've got folders that I've created, right? And we'll get into some of this as I go on. And most of this is pretty straightforward, like read later. This is where I'll put links to articles and things that I want to read later on. Okay, so most of that's pretty straightforward. So right off the bat, the features and functionality are, create the ability to create folders and subfolders, to organize and store items any way you see fit. And then you can use hashtags is probably not the best word, but you have the ability to tag things in Bublup. So hashtag suggests that you just type it with a £, but it's actually a specific thing you can do in Bublup, where if I want to tag something, as I recall, you can't tag a folder, but I can go into, let's say, one of these book suggestions, and I can right click and then add a tag, and I can just say, read or read. You can't hit the space bar, read later, right? Something like that. Read dash later, so it's easier to read. So I can tag things like that, which then, I'll be able to find them in a search up here. It will show me when I type something, it will show me any tags that match my search and so on and so forth. So you have tagging built right into the product, where you can, again, it's just another way of indexing things, so that even though things might be organized in a folder, a tag might be a way to index things in a broader sense than just what's in a folder, right? And what that does, in any app that has a function like this, is it gives you more of a geometric way of organizing things as opposed to just linear. A lot of apps are linear. You have just folders and subfolders, or, rows and columns like a spreadsheet. And our brains don't work that way. Our brains are geometric in terms of the way we think about things and connect dots. And, my mind, I can go off on all kinds of tangents and down all kinds of rabbit holes. But next thing I know, I'm connecting ideas that initially didn't seem to have anything to do with one another. And I love when an app like Bublup gives you the ability to index things that way, where I can sort of link anything from one place to anything from another place very easily. Again, tags is one example of how I can bind things together, even though they live in separate folders. So tagging is a great feature that Bublup has. The other thing, and this is another big criteria that probably should be listed as the fourth criteria that I evaluate when I look at an app, is it has to have a really good mobile app. One thing I can't stand is when the mobile app doesn't give me access to a lot of the key features that I have access to on the desktop app. I want the peace of mind of knowing that when I walk away from my desk and I'm carrying my mobile device with me, and I suddenly realize there's something I want to make sure I have access to that I know I stored in Bublup, I want to make sure that I can find that very quickly and easily in Bublup. And as you can see from the screenshot, the layout looks just like what it does on my desktop, tailored, of course, to a smaller screen. And I can assure you, when you play around with this very quickly, you'll find that you can access anything you need. So if I know I'm leaving my office and there's something I'm definitely going to need access to, let's say in a meeting that I'm going to, then the easiest thing to do is add it to my favorites. And then from the mobile app, I tap on my favorites and it's right there at my fingertips, right? So again, makes it even more geometric in nature, in that I can make it easy for me to access the things that I know I need today. Then when I'm done with that meeting, when the day is over, I can remove it from my favorites and it's still there in its permanent location, right? So let's check to see if there's any questions.
I'm trying to answer them as they come in.
Okay, great. Okay, and we're going to talk about roles in a few minutes, actually. So let's talk about, still more of an overview and some of the benefits, right? So when we talk about sharing, and I'm going to illustrate and discuss some of these features initially at a high level, and then we'll dig in and demonstrate some of them. So you're going to be able to share a folder with somebody or share an individual item with somebody, and you can either share it with a public link, or you can set specific permissions and say they can only view it or they can interact with it. We'll demonstrate that in a little bit. But the bottom line is this makes sharing and collaboration very easy to do. And it gives you the flexibility that you need so that you can be specific. And Grace is going to show you how, towards the end of this, how you can take it to another level where Bublup has a Teams feature. It's a premium feature, so you've definitely got to have a paid account for it, but where you can create organizations and then create teams of people based on departments, let's say. And then you can give people access, you can give a whole department access, so you don't have to sit there individually picking the people that need access to the one thing, right? So we'll get into that a little more. We're also going to talk to you about the brand new email capture feature. Now, this is different than what I was talking about a few minutes ago when I talked about forwarding emails in. This is where you can actually use Bublup, and I'll show you an example of this when we get to this part where we're going to dive in a little deeper in a few minutes. You can actually use Bublup to create that lead magnet. So you basically create a folder in Bublup with, stuff that you've added that's got valuable information. For me, it could be a cluster of videos that you've done or blog posts that conform to a certain subject that just makes it easier for people to access the things that share that common subject matter quickly, as opposed to searching around in your blog. Or maybe you make it things that they don't have access to anywhere else. The point is, they have a feature where you can use a folder as a lead magnet, which means you can send the link to people, and before they can see its contents, they have to submit their email address. And there's 2 apps that it integrates with, which you'll see in the demo in a few minutes, including MailChimp, that you can link to. So if you're using MailChimp, the emails that you capture go right into a list in MailChimp, and now you can start emailing them, and they'll get the language. They'll understand that they're opting into your list when they do this, okay? Next thing, Bublup makes organizing easy. The visual nature of it, first and foremost, makes it really easy. For me, one of the reasons I love Notion is every page you assign an icon and a header image. It helps me understand what planet I'm on, especially over time as you accumulate a lot of stuff. You really want your app to be visual in nature, because most of us will recognize things much faster with our eyes than we will with our brains, in terms of having to stop and read something, right? And let's face it, these days, who has time for that? We want something that in like a 5-second glance we know exactly what it is and whether or not it's what we're looking for, right? So and you'll see examples of this as we go through everything. So now let's talk about the benefits specifically for accountants and bookkeepers. And here I'm gonna show you this as an example, right? So let's say I have a client that I send monthly reports to. Okay. Now in the screenshot, you can see how I might lay this out, but let's go straight to it. Okay. Let's just go to this one, and I stuck it as a sample folder here. And so now you're seeing I went to recent, how to enhance, right? And then let's go to, I think it's this sample client, Acme Realty. So I have a folder for the client, right? And now I have a folder called reports. And then I have a folder for the year, right? This keeps it super organized, right? And you can already see the visual, like it's very clear, that's 2023, okay? And then a folder for each month. And then inside of each of these folders, I could just drop the PDF. So I save the PDF reports out of QuickBooks Online, and I drop them in here. And once I've done that, I can just click share, and I can send an invitation. It's warning me because it's a subfolder, and so it needs to be configured to have separate sharing permissions than its parent. So I'll do that real quick. When I go in here, I just turn this on, which says I can use different members and permissions for January. I'll proceed and confirm that I want all members from the parent folder to be included. Okay, and now I can send the invitation and just enter my client's email address and write them a quick little note that says, hey, here's your January reports for the year. Let me know if you have any questions. And the beauty of this is, so let's say and I'm going to grab a PDF. It's not going to be a QuickBooks Online report, but it'll be a PDF. So you'll get the gist of how this works. So I'm going to drag, this is the PDF version of Think and Grow Rich. which I happen to keep handy in my Drive folder. But let's pretend that this was a report. All I have to do now is, first of all, if the conversation needs to be had around this report, we can do it right here, right? And I can tag, I can say, Grace, did you see your gross profit percentage this month? Boom. Now Grace is going to get notified about that and she can respond. So, we use tools like Slack or Discord to keep in touch with our clients in general conversations. But for conversations like this, in my experience, my opinion, is it's much better to have the conversation in the context of the thing we're talking about, right? So what better place to have a conversation about January, and there's the notification, right? So I can click on that and she confirms, yes, I got it, thanks. So we can have the conversation. If she has questions to say, hey, some of these numbers don't look right, we can talk about that here. And then I can go in and address it. And if there's something that needs to be fixed, I'll fix it in QuickBooks and then rerun the report and drop it in here. And then I can handle that any number of ways. I can add it in as like a version 2 and keep this here. I could create a subfolder for like archived or older versions of reports and drag the old one in there and so on. That's totally up to you. The key, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to learn how to navigate Bublup really well so that it's intuitive. You just think, okay, this is how I prefer to handle this workflow. Some people may prefer just delete the old one and stick with only the most recent one, right? And Carolyn says in the chat, she loves the breadcrumbs. Yep. So the breadcrumbs that she's referring to are across the top here where it kind of shows you exactly what planet you're on. And by the way, this is all interactive. I can click back here to get back up to the 2023 folder, right? I can be anywhere else in Bublup, by the way. I can go home. And if I know that I want to be in the July folder for that client, I can type July in the search, right? And here's an important point I want to bring up, and I'm going to talk about this more later, is how you name things is important. So these are both in 2023, right? And they're both called July. Okay, so I can't tell from this the difference between the two, which means I need to do a little better job of naming things. Like maybe this should be July, because that's the sort of more relevant piece. And then I'll just put like Acme, right? So now if I go back home and I search for July, now I can see this is the Acme one. I don't know what this one is. This is something that's in the trash, and in the trash can, it divides it up between year and month. So I know when it was deleted, I can look for stuff to restore. So I look at this and I say, all right, this caused me some confusion. I'm just going to delete it. Right. And so I see the comments, that it's kind of like Google Drive in terms of organization, but fancier, which I'd agree with. Right. So you don't have to install Bublup. It's a web app. So you log in and it's all there. That's one of the beauties of it. Carolyn says, I believe G Drive changed it recently. It is not easy to see anymore. I don't know what that's in reference to.
The breadcrumbs, I think.
Oh, the breadcrumbs. Got it. Yeah, I mean, G Drive, I think, is more designed to rely very heavily on the search. But here with Bublup, again, it's one of the reasons I love it is it's very visual, right? So let's move on before I get too far down a rabbit hole here, because we do have quite a bit to cover here. But keep the questions coming. This is great, right? So you've just seen the examples, I think, of the visual organization and the intuitive interface. It looks good, which makes it easy to organize, categorize, and easily reference information. And anybody who's been around me for a minute has heard me use that buzz phrase many times. Whenever I have an information management system, if it's going to work well for me, it means I need to be able to organize, categorize, and easily reference information. That last part, reference information, means that everything's optimized for retrieval. See, one of the problems, and I think one of the things that causes a lot of people a lot of stress in the workplace these days, is most of us are optimizing for transmission. Somebody asks us for some information, we compile it, drop it in an email, send the email off. 6 weeks later, the client says, hey, I lost track of where that information is. Why? Because they also left it in their inbox and it's buried now, and they don't even know what to search for in order to find it, nor might you. So the difference is when you take the time, let's say, to put it in a logical place, let's say in Bublup, organized under that client and named really well so that you don't have to think too much about what to search for. Then when that client comes back to you in 6 weeks and you need to find that for them, it's minimal disruption on your part because in 2 seconds you can find it and send them the link and say, here, use this link, bookmark it, do whatever you got to do. But if you lose track of it again, just ask me. I can find it in less than 30 seconds and send it to you. That to me is a system that is well optimized for retrieval. And that's the most important thing. That's the thing that when we're talking about group productivity is the most important, is most of us are doing things based on transmission. If we take the extra time to put things in a central location that's easier to access, it might seem like, oh God, I'm going to waste all this time up front. But the reality is it saves you much more time in the long run. I can promise you, right? So now we'll talk about, again, under the heading of the benefits is I mentioned the sharing and the collaborative capabilities. There's 3 different ways we can share things here. And we can do a public link, which is kind of what I've been doing in my weekly email. Some of you have seen that for each weekly email that I send out now, I create a folder in Bublup for that email. And any links or resources I mention are going to be bookmarked in that folder. And I've been linking you to the Bublup folder every week so that if you just want a quick place to see all those resources that were mentioned, in one click, you can be there. It just saves you the trouble of having to scan up and down the email again to find the thing you were looking for that I might have mentioned, right? And I see the comments about file naming. The struggle is real, right? I was talking to somebody in 97 and Up the other day who he mentioned that he's like a squirrel with his spreadsheets. I think it was Kevin. He's like, I create all these spreadsheets and then I can't find them again. It's worse than like when squirrels hide their nuts and can't find them. So naming is important, and Bublup's not going to do that for you, but you'll see if you take the time up front to name things really well and have kind of like a naming convention so that there's a specific sort of SOP for how you name things, standard operating procedure for how things are named, then you don't have to think that much about it. And you spend the extra 10 seconds doing it now so you can find the thing that you need later, right? And as I mentioned, and I've already demonstrated, to send somebody an invite, all you need is an email address. And that's what you'll do, of course, if you don't want something being public, but you just want that individual to be invited. What I may not have shown you, which I'll do now, is how to make it specific in terms of what level of permission they have. So let me go into recent and I'll go into how to enhance. Okay, and then let's say I want to see what permissions we have. First of all, up here, I can see who's in the folder. So I can already see that Grace is here, okay? Now these icons tell you what level of access they have, but until you get familiar with those, you're not going to know. So if I click this, and same issue as before, so I'm already here, I'm just going to turn that on. And now I can see that Grace has admin level permissions. The other choice, if I were to invite somebody else right now, is they can only view it. They can add to it, right? Meaning they can add their own stuff, but they can't touch anything that somebody else has added. Or they can edit, which means they can actually, that means they could go in and theoretically delete something I've put in there. So careful with that one. And obviously admin is, superpowers, right? So Grace and I are both admins. Obviously, when you're doing this, you take into consideration who you're inviting in and how much you trust them not to screw things up, right? So I know if I'm collaborating with Grace, I'm pretty sure she knows what she's doing. She's not going to delete something that shouldn't get deleted. So I don't mind giving her admin privileges here, right?
And Seth, the other if anyone noticed, the other checkbox there is the ability to invite other people.
Right.
So that's the other little thing there. If that's checked or unchecked, regardless of your
Oh, right. So over here, I guess I chose when I added you originally to allow you to invite. So let's look at that, or that goes with the level of permissions that's been assigned, right?
Yes, because I'm an admin, I'm automatically allowed to do that, but it can also be changed for individuals depending on.
Right. So here it is. When I go to invite, if I were to invite somebody right now, if this is not checked, I can uncheck this so they won't be able to invite other people, but they'll otherwise have whatever permissions I've given them here. So thank you for pointing that out. That's important. Right. So you can assign the level of permissions, and then by default, it's checked off. I would think can view would not include that by default, but anyway, so just mind that checkbox and make sure that you understand, whether or not you want somebody to be able to invite others. Like if you're inviting a client, you probably would want that checked off so they can invite other employees of theirs, so you don't have to be burdened with it every time they have somebody else at their organization that they want included there. Can we bulk download docs? Grace, that's a good question. Like if I have a bunch of PDFs in here, can I select them all and download them all at once, or?
Yes, and so you can drag to highlight. You can also download folders. So these are folders. I'm not sure if it'll let you download multiple folders. That
looks
might
like,
just download that one. But yeah, so you can download on a folder basis. You can select multiple items and download those individually. You can, select multiple items and email them to someone really quickly from within Bublup. There's lots of sharing methods.
so let's see what I got here. It named it forecasts, and it's just downloaded. And I love that it downloads the hyperlinks as like an internet link, Genius Sheets. So it did just download the one folder though.
Yes, I think that should be made more clear, and I'll make a note of that. Yeah, you can't download multiple folders at once, so that could be a bit tedious for somebody.
Sure.
But you can select multiple items inside of a folder. And if that folder that you downloaded had documents or notes, it would respect the file type of however it was uploaded to begin with.
Right. So, and this was a Google Sheet, by the way. So if you noticed, it just rendered it as a link, which once I clicked on it, I'm sure it would have taken me to Google Sheets as long as I actually had permission to access that particular Google Sheet. So, all right. Oh, I didn't mean to stop sharing. Try that again. All right. So that's great stuff, actually. I'm glad great question, and thank you, Grace, for clearing that up. Here's the feature I was telling you about earlier, and I've already got a whole video and blog post on this because I got so excited about it. In fact, this got me excited about it enough to really share with our friends at 97 and up. And I know a few of our members at 97 and up got excited and started using Bublup for this very specific feature, which was it makes it very easy to forward emails into Bublup, and Bublup will render those emails and any attachments that come with them as PDFs. If there are multiple attachments, it'll create a folder which will include everything that was attached. And you can see from the screenshot that I had to add in the authorized emails, meaning it will only work in my account if the email is forwarded from one of the email addresses that I've listed here, right? So if I go into my Bublup account and I go to my info and down here, save emails to Bublup, right? Here's where you would go and you would enter an email address. So it doesn't even matter that you can see the emails because you don't have the ability to send from either of these emails. Only I do. So nothing's getting into my Bublup account unless I've actually intentionally sent it. Of course, the pro tip here is to add the Bublup email address that you're sending it to as a contact in your whatever, if it's Gmail, in your Google contacts. If you're using some other Outlook or whatever, just make sure it's in your contacts. The email address you're forwarding to is going to be whatever your username is at mybublup.com. Right. So the instructions are all here. Very, very easy to set this up. And I'll show you what it looks like. If I go over to home and click email. So whenever you forward an email, this is where it lands. OK. In the write up in the screenshots, you'll see an example of this, which is a real live example where a client of mine had forwarded me a whole bunch of her B of A Alaska credit card statements. And I just forwarded them into Bublup because I didn't have time to work on it at the moment, but I wanted it in a place where I was going to be able to access it quickly when I was ready. And of course, I'm not going to click in here because it's got her account information on it. But inside of this folder are all the PDFs of the statements that were attached to her email that she forwarded to me, right? Over here are just some simple emails. I was playing around with. I registered for this Grant Cardone thing on real estate investing. So this is just the email with the confirmation with my order number and everything, right? So it becomes a really reliable repository for any emails that and by the way, really important, like the main reason behind having some system like this, if it's not Bublup, something is to keep my inbox clean. Right. One of the things that causes us a lot of stress in the workplace is having an inbox with hundreds or even thousands of emails. I've seen them And that creates so much stress. And the real downer of that productivity wise is you are revisiting those emails over and over and over again. Every time you open up the inbox, whether you realize it or not, your brain is registering that stuff. And I guarantee you it's causing you stress, even if you're not aware of it. Right. So it's really, really important to have a process that lets you keep your inbox clean, that lets you take any emails that require any kind of follow-up and forward them into a system that you can trust. And a system you can trust means you're going to go back and check it later because it's I don't even want to say it's a habit you've made. It's your lifestyle to go check that thing every day throughout the day. Right. So this was the thing that really hooked. I've been in Bublup for a few years and played with it. When I think I got an email from Bublup. I'm on their email list that mentioned this. And I'm like, wait a minute, maybe this is my solution. And it turned out it was, because I was really struggling with how to get emails into Notion, which is my primary work management tool. So this is a perfect and clear example of how Bublup provides an enhancement. So I still manage the main work, what I need to do in Notion. But when I forward an email to Bublup, which represents a follow-up to that task, then I can take that link to the item in Bublup and just drop that link into Notion. Notion creates a beautiful bookmark. So when I'm ready to work on that thing, it's right there at my fingertips. I click the link, it opens up that Bublup folder in a new tab, and I have access to all the stuff I need to do the work I need to do while I'm working on that stuff. So it takes an extra step or second to do it, but it's worth it. One other thing that I mentioned in the write-up as kind of a pro tip is, and this is my feedback request actually with Wade, who used to work for Bublup, is when I forward an email like this, I want a quick way when I reach the point where I'm done with it to link back to that email so I can reply. Most of the time after I'm finished working on whatever that email outlined for me to do, then it's time to get back to that email and reply. Again, I don't want to leave it in my inbox, but I want a quick way back to it. So what I started to do is I'll add a comment to the email and I'll copy and paste. I use Gmail, I use Google Workspace. So I'll copy and paste the URL directly to that email as a comment on this item so that when I'm done, and I may have clicked over from Notion to this, and when I do that, I'm going to be looking at something that looks like this. This is a PDF rendered in my browser, right? But when I'm done, I'll have that link in the comment. So I have right at my fingertips, instead of having to search my emails, I can just click right over to the email and bang that reply button and finish it off, and then do whatever I'm going to do here in terms of whatever workflow I have around that kind of stuff. So this is a huge, huge lifesaver for me in terms of workflow. And here I've got the screenshots where I've blurred some stuff out. You're going to get access to the slides as well as the full document that I promised. It was 33, now 34 pages with screenshots. And each of the screenshots, by the way, is linked to a higher res version. So so you can get a close look at what this stuff all looks like. And Grace, I believe email capture this means you're up to demonstrate the email capture thing. And then I can show an example. Just cue me in when you're ready for me to show the example of the one that I subscribe to.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I'm going to demonstrate we call it email collection, or you may have heard the term lead magnet. I think that's the industry term. This is what Seth mentioned about how you can collect people's emails to use for, sending out your blog or whatever you're interested in. So I'm going to show an example of setting this up. This is definitely an advanced feature. So I don't expect you guys to get it right away, but it's definitely very useful if you want to collect a lot of emails to be able to have an audience to reach. So in my example, I'm just going to pretend that I have a personal blog called Travel with Grace. Maybe I didn't write these, but let's pretend I did. I wrote, some articles about Colorado, Greece, Italy. And, I want to tell my audience as an influencer or as a businesswoman or whatever, hey, you can have access to this content in this folder, but I want them to do it through this email collection. So I'm going to go to this menu here. We call this the hamburger menu in the upper left, and I'm going to hit folder settings. And then you'll see a couple things here, but we're interested in email collection. So this allows you to, grow your email list rapidly. So when you enable it, you have to set it up with one of the providers. Right now, this is a very new feature for us. We currently work with MailChimp MailChimp or ConvertKit. So I'm going to show an example with MailChimp. And this is why I said it's an advanced feature. You got to know how to set up these API keys. But we have a very useful support site up here. You can always go to bublup.com/support and you can search for what you're trying to figure out. So, here's our steps. So don't feel like you have to remember exactly what I'm about to tell you. This would walk you through the steps. So basically, step one is, you got to get this API key. So inside of MailChimp, they, have this option to create a key. So I can create a key. I can call it Travel with Grace. I'm going to generate that key and I'm going to copy. Then I'm going to go right back in here and paste it there. This server thing is actually just the end of this. So that's how you get that one. And then there's something called an audience ID. And again, all of these instructions are on our support site. So again, you'd go back to MailChimp, you'd grab the audience ID, you'd copy that in here. And then maybe you have some tags. Maybe you want to remember that that this stuff's coming from Bublup. When you get your contacts, you want to know that these contacts came through a Bublup reference. So I'll hit save. Now I have this. You see here, it says invitation link down here. So this is the invitation link you want to use in order to share this with anyone. So now I can go and I can just copy this link and I could go post this on my Instagram, my Facebook, any sort of way that you wanted to gain clients or contacts. So I'm going to show you an example. I'm just going to go to a random web browser here. And I'm going to paste this invite. So this is the link that someone would click on if they got the link from you and they wanted to join. So now it's going to say, hey, Grace Taylor invited you to view this. By joining this folder, you agree to receive emails. So they're accepting and agreeing to this when they do this. So I'm going to hit accept. Now I have access to this folder. I didn't have to notice that the user didn't have to go and create a password. They didn't have to do anything to get access to this. They don't even really need to sign up for an account. I happen to already be signed in as somebody else, but in general, it's just a simpler workflow compared to the usual sign up process. So now I'll go back and I'll show you what this would look like. Inside of my MailChimp, I now see, and I mean, it's a little confusing because it's my little fake email, but Kevin just joined. So now, and it's tagged as Bublup. So I can see, oh, I got somebody to join my email list through Bublup. So that's pretty much that feature. I know I went through very quickly, but don't worry, we will be sending you links with explanations for all of these advanced features, and we have an extensive support site.
Great. Thanks so much, Grace. That's awesome. And so for a lot of you who may have struggled with, like, how are you going to create a lead magnet that you can share with people in exchange for their emails? Now you've got an easy way to do it. And all you have to do is get creative about compiling valuable information in a folder in Bublup and then generate that, use that feature, in order to start generating a list. And, we didn't even get to show you this, but you can actually write general comments in that folder, which anybody who's in that folder will get a notification about. So you can post announcements and all kinds of things that they will receive notices about. And, so it's like anything else along these lines. You want to be careful not to overdo it. I assume there's a way to opt out, Grace. It's like whenever they get a notification, they probably have an unsubscribe link or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So, next, and again, we'll talk about primary work management tool and how to integrate, right? So I already gave you an example where I showed you the email forwarding thing, and I described how you would just link that item in Bublup into a task and ClickUp or a note in Notion or whatever you do in Asana. I haven't looked at Asana in years. But you'll obviously just copy and paste the link. So that's how you get it integrated. Right now, let me show you something else. And this is something that I've done. It's kind of serves two purposes. One, it illustrates a couple of important features in Bublup. Two, it's a good example of what a potential lead magnet type folder might look like, where because it's so visual and because you're all experts in accounting and bookkeeping, you could create a series of screenshots that teach how to do something in QuickBooks Online, organize them in a Bublup folder in the right order in sequence, and then share that with people, right? And then, but here's what I really want to show you about this, which is as follows. Let me go over here and first of all, being on the receiving end of it, I subscribe to this one so I could play with it from that side, the feature that Grace just showed you. So this is what hers look like. This woman is a travel person specifically for New York City, places to see, and she's just done a beautiful job. Obviously, she had somebody, I'm sure, doing the design, unless she's a designer herself. But you can see she's got these gorgeous PDFs that, you know, give you like what do you call it, like tips for places to eat and things to see when you're in New York City. So just to, you know, give you some more ideas about that. So let's go over to my folder for this particular webinar. And in the write-up, there's a lot of screenshots. You've seen a lot of them, you know, in the slides that I've been going through with you. So what I did was I created this folder right in here called screenshots. Okay. And here are all the screenshots that are actually in the detailed document that you're going to have access to. And most of these show up in the slides somewhere. Excuse me. And I created what's called a role here, right? And so when I create that role, it basically, I can create multiple roles from the same folder. So this is the one role I've created so far, and it's just got all of them in it. And as quickly as I could click to create the role, it creates this. I didn't have to spend any time designing anything. You can edit this and design it all day, but you don't have to. And look how beautiful this already looks, right? And the idea here is now you can go into here and you can get a close-up look at any of the screenshots that you've seen during the course of this webinar, right? So this is, you know, a pretty simple use case, but again, just to give you the visual and give you the ideas. And like I said at the beginning, what I really hope you'll walk away with here are some, you know, some inspiration for ideas you can use in terms of, you know, how you're going to use Bublup. So there you go. So I could create a series of screenshots like that in the email capture type folder that Grace just demonstrated. So you use a series of screenshots. So you don't want to do videos, don't do videos. That's fine. Just take screenshots. Use Snagit, take a bunch of screenshots, mark up the screenshots for how to post an invoice in QuickBooks Online. You can even do it for your clients and some of you, I know you use ScribeHow, you know, to do this kind of stuff. You could even put that kind of stuff in a Bublup folder. So it's nice and organized and it's pretty visual. And, you know, you can share those with clients and say, here are the steps for how to add your accountant in QuickBooks Online, right? Perfect for that kind of stuff. So how can it enhance existing workflows? Well, there's one example. I mentioned about putting the link to the email as a comment on that email, right? So I'll skip past that real quick. Uncategorized transactions in QuickBooks Online, right? Oops, I didn't mean to go back or go forward. Let's look at how you might handle uncategorized transactions. Now, I know a lot of you already have, you know, apps for this kind of thing, like you're using Keeper or something. I think Greg was talking about that at the beginning. Right. But let's look at how we might do uncategorized transactions. So let's go to here, and I think we have it in client X, right? And here's client X uncategorized. So notice the naming. So I have client X uncategorized. So when I'm searching for it, it's going to be very clear which is the uncategorized folder for client X, right? Otherwise, it's going to get very confusing in a search. So in here, I have a folder called resolved, right? But in this one, I've got the screenshot. So I can share this with the client and say, hey, I need some clarification on this particular transaction. You know, we've got a payment of $635. Only 150 of it has been applied. You know, what am I supposed to do with that extra credit? Now, the other thing I've done, and I shared this with you earlier, is, you know, you can have the conversation right here in Bublup so that you can share this with the client. They can come in and say, oh, let me post the invoice, the other invoice that the rest of that payment needs to be applied to. I forgot to record it. You know, who knows? But the point is, I can actually link right to the transaction in QuickBooks Online. So when I share with the client, I can say, by the way, log in and then click this link so you can look directly at the transaction I'm referring to here. Because we're in a cloud-based app that lives entirely in the cloud and we're linking to something in another cloud-based app, this kind of thing gets really, really easy to do. And it makes it so ridiculously easy. So if for any reason you're not already using Keeper, which handles uncategorized beautifully, you know, and you want a solution because you just don't need Keeper and everything else that it does, then this would be a great alternative for how to handle something like uncategorized transactions. Sharing and collaboration on interactive reports, the Google Drive integration. So let's take a look at that real quick. I had it up and I think I closed it. So let's just go to, I know it was called forecast. client X forecast. So it does give you the trail, like it shows me here that this is client X. So that helps. If I go there,
To point out a little bit earlier, you can always search, if like, for example, when you had July 2023, we will search the breadcrumbs as well. So if you don't remember the full name of your folder, you can search, I knew it was inside this folder and it might be called this. Makes searching a little bit easier.
got it. Got it. So this is a spreadsheet, a Google Sheet that I linked directly in this folder, as simple as clicking share in Google Sheets to get the link and then come in here and Control V to paste, right? It's that simple to paste in a Google Sheet. So if I double click this, it's going to open up the Google Sheet. And this is just a sample thing that I did with Google Sheets and Genius Sheets. So it's going to pull in data now. The other thing that's really cool with Bublup is it has a direct integration with Google Docs. So if I want to create a new Google Sheet here, I can right click. I can choose Google Document and then choose Google Sheets. I can title it New Forecast. Done. And it's going to just have me confirm my Google account for security, of course. And now it just created the document and created the link to the document. So now I can double click that. So pretty slick, where in terms of, again, collaborating with clients, sharing with clients, you can organize things beautifully in Bublup folders to share with your clients and have things directly linked to Google Sheets. And obviously you can do the same kind of thing with Microsoft Office documents as well, but there's not a direct integration. Microsoft Office, you would probably paste a link to your web sort of side version of that Office doc if you wanted to do something similar. Travel and conferences, I love this. So a lot of you were just at Scaling New Heights, and some of you are going to be going to QuickBooks Connect later this year. So here's a really slick use case for this. Let's go. I created a folder here, under this webinars folder called conferences, right? And then within that, you'd have a folder for each different conference. So let's go to QuickBooks Connect. Okay. And notice I've got 3 subfolders: registration. So I put all my registration info here, confirmations, whatever I need. It makes it really easy to find when I need it. When I'm online and ready to get checked in, it's all here. I don't have to go looking far for it. Then here I would have a folder with all the sessions, right? So here I would just create probably a subfolder for all the different sessions I want to attend. And then anytime I want to take notes about that session, I can create a new note right here. And it's got a full rich text, note-taking feature here. You can resize this, move it around as you need. And this way you're taking notes. It lives in the cloud. You're not going to lose it, right? And again, it's there at your fingertips, ready when you need it, when you're looking for it later. So you get back from the conference, you want to kind of review your notes to figure out which things you're going to take and implement. Right. And then, of course, we have the travel folder, which is where you're going to put all your airfare confirmations, your hotel, and anything else travel related that you want to make sure you have at your fingertips. So I love this use case for Bublup because, especially because the mobile app on this is beautiful. So from the mobile app, really easy. And then, of course, what you'd probably want to do when you're getting close to QuickBooks Connect is add this folder to your favorites. Right. So I forget how to do it from within the folder, but if I go back here, I can just right click and add to faves.
There's a little star in the upper right. It's easy to miss. It's very upper right, down a little, under sort.
Under sort. Oh, there. Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right. So there's the way to do it when you're actually in the folder, right? And this way you just keep in your favorites. So from your mobile, in 2 clicks, you just tap into your favorites. And of course, the trick with any program that has a bookmarking system like this is not to overload it with 8,000 things, because then it defeats the purpose, right? So your favorites, as a rule, should just have the things, a short list of things that you need access to either very soon or very frequently, right? So that is that. Travel and conferences, we just talked about. Somebody asked, I saw, about the calendaring feature. So you can add things to your calendar, to your Google Calendar, or I imagine your Outlook calendar, right? Very, very easy to do. So let's say I wanted to remember to work on this B of A folder, for example. Then I could just right click it, choose add to calendar. I'm going to sign in with Google. Again, security is super important, right? So the event has been created, but I didn't get a chance to change the parameters. I should have done that beforehand. So the trick to that is setting up these parameters, like it just defaulted to today, basically in 15 minutes from now. right? So I should have changed those if I needed to before confirming. But that's okay. Now I can just jump into my Google Calendar and fix that easily enough. But that's all it takes to calendar something that's in Bublup is just a right click and add to calendar and follow the prompts, right? Couldn't really be much easier than that.
And then what it will do is it'll make an event in your calendar with a link back exactly to that.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Or that item.
Let's show that actually. So let me just go into my calendar for today. Okay, there it is. And if I expand it, yeah, there's the link. So I can click that to get right to work and have all the information I need, at my fingertips. And let's close out of that real quick. So that's what that looks like. All right, now creating folders and subfolders, I haven't actually shown you. So let's show you. So if I wanted to create another folder for this, like maybe people I want to meet. So it's easy, right click, folder, people I want to meet. And so I might just make a list in there, right? And this is cool. I haven't really showed you creating a folder. So you can customize the folder in background. You have access to more stock photography when you have a paid account. But when I go in there, it'll use your folder's title to come up with, what appears to be relevant images, right? So she looks nice. And it's just background stuff. It's just aesthetics, but it makes a difference. Okay. And then of course I can create notes or, grab a link to their LinkedIn profile and paste it in here, right? So I can kind of keep track of people that I want to make sure I get to meet and network with and so on and so forth, right? Backing up to the parent QuickBooks Connect folder. This is a link to the general QuickBooksConnect.com page. Let's say I just want this whole thing clean. I just really want folders here. Then I can move this into the registration folder, right? Because that's probably the appropriate place for it. So just click and drag. It's that easy to move things around. Okay. The other thing I can do, there's not an undo. So let me move it back. Or let's say I wanted to move it back from here. I can right click, move to, and then I can choose QuickBooks Connect. It's going to show me the recent folders that I've been in. So I can click that and then go back. And there it is, back where it started. So that's the other way to move things, especially if you want to move things in bulk. You can click and drag to select. You can select a bunch of things and then right click one of them and you can move them all at once. So
You can also drag into your breadcrumbs. You can drag from your desktop files into here. You can drag links into here. Drag and drop on desktop is very useful.
Yeah, I do a lot of that, like dragging. Well, I did earlier, like with the PDF file. But yeah, anything that's on your desktop, you can just drag over, and it handles it beautifully. Let's say this is something I just kind of bookmarked here because I didn't want to go looking for it later and review later. But let's say I'm like, you know what? It's just put it in review later. Like Grace just pointed out, I can click and drag, and you see how it lights up. It confirms, like, okay, and that's so smart to me. Like when apps take the time to give you that visual, like it gives me the assurance, like, okay, it's going to drop there when I let go of the mouse button. I love stuff like that. And so again, for a local file, you can drag and drop. For a web-based file like a Google Doc, just copy and paste the URL. It's just about that easy. So now let's talk about strategies, right? How might you organize your folders in Bublup? So I'll go back to my sample folder here for this webinar. How to enhance. See how easy that was to find because of the visual, because I recognize the coloring in the background of that folder, right? Just makes it so easy. And so if I go in as an example, so let's say this, instead of the webinars folder, let's say this was my company folder, right? I might have like an admin archive folder like this, forget about screenshots. So I have a client X and a sample client. I probably wouldn't want to do it that way. Let's create a new folder and call it clients. Maybe I'll call it active clients because then I can have a folder for inactive clients, right? Okay, it didn't find an image for me. Search here. We're all excited about active clients, right? Then I can go back here and I can take these two guys, click and drag to select them both, right? And where'd my clients folder go? Oh, active clients. Duh. See, so I just dragged them both in real quick, and now they're both here. Okay, now let's go into client X. And so I have, this is a cool idea. I have client X bookmarks, right? So I click into client X bookmarks. And by the way, this is a different kind of view than you've seen so far. You do this by clicking view, and I just chose to organize this as a list instead of tiles, right? And then there's gallery, which is also cool. So that's the kind of thing you just play with and decide what you like. For this purpose, the list makes sense to me. So this might be all the bank accounts and credit card accounts that the client uses that I need to be able to log into. I put it at my fingertips. Instead of relying on just my browser bookmarks, where I'll have one very long list of bookmarks that I might need for any given client, I have a list of bookmarks specific to this client. This is what I need when I'm working on this client. And remember that this is a web app, so I can keep this open in one tab while I have another folder open for that same client in another tab, right? So again, workflow, wanting to make sure that things are very accessible at my fingertips, and you know, so that I can find what I need, retrieve what I need in 30 seconds or less. So, and there's a QuickBooks Online login. If they use Stripe, you know, whatever you need, you go to the website, grab the URL, copy it, and then paste it here into a folder like this. Okay. That's bookmarks. We talked about uncategorized, and I showed you forecast. So here, it's just like the way you might organize it in Windows Explorer, right? Or in Google Drive, where you would just create the folders to organize things the way that you, the way that you need. So I'm looking at the questions now. So Todd's asking, can this be an alternative to OneNote? Sure, you can, especially using the note feature. I would be more inclined to use Notion as an alternative to OneNote, but you can definitely use this, because like OneNote, you can kind of drag and drop things and put them anywhere. So yes, it could definitely be used as an alternative to OneNote. So how do I get back to Notion for my task or calendar from Bublup? So the trick to that is going to be linking back and forth, right? So that's going to be a little manual. There's no sort of automated way to do that. If I want to have, if this forecast that I'm going to work on is going to be a task in Notion, then I'm going to copy this shareable link and I'm going to paste it into Notion. And if I want to be able to, so that's going to let me get from Notion over to here real quick. If I want to get from here back to Notion, and you may not need to, this is totally up to you and how you manage your workflow. But again, you could put a comment on here and paste the link to its corresponding note in Notion, right? Where does the review later live? That's one of the system sections. So that's right up here. When you're on the home screen, it's right here. You click in there and this is going to have, you can see I've got a bunch of stuff that I've clipped and included here. Right. And as you've already seen, like this, I can move to books, right? So if the thing I'm looking for doesn't show up in the list of recent things, I just choose another folder and I'll use the search. Although books to read is right there because it gives me like a little window of my home folder. I can just click that and click move here. Done. So that's how really you should have a workflow where daily you go through, you'll review later and organize everything, right? So organize, categorize, and use. And so organize starts after a previous step, which is capture, right? If you follow David Allen's getting things done methodology, it's capture, clarify, organize, right? And so you capture it, it goes into review later, you clarify, what does this mean to me? Is it important to me? And then you organize it by moving it into its permanent location. So you should have a daily process where you clean out your review later, because you let this accumulate, it's no better than letting your inbox accumulate in your email. And obviously that's no good. All right, next up, organizing your documents and files in Bublup. So I'm going to show you an example. Because in my case, it's all sample stuff. So if I go into my actual Nerd Enterprises folder here, you'll see I've got, I shouldn't say it's all sample stuff. Some of it I actually use. I just don't have any real client information, especially since I no longer have any actual accounting clients anymore. But you'll see I have this folder called AI tools, because this is a big topic now that I'm researching. And so as I'm going on the web and I'm learning about different AI tools, I'm clipping them and I'm sticking them here, to research later. And I have more of that actually still sitting in review later. Here's something I'm sort of toying with, where it's a folder called apps, and there's Bublup, right? So I'm going to create probably some kind of a resource here where I list different apps and I can write notes about them, right? Here is a blog post from Bublup's blog that I was interested in, and And I'll give you a little tip here. I could care less about what an interior designer needs to do or needs to know how to do, but it still interests me to read blog posts like this, because even though it's written for an interior designer, it gives me ideas. I get a lot of inspiration from the most unlikely of places, right? So I love following Bublup's blog. And like I said, you'll get posts about things that you may not think you need to know about, but when you click over and you understand how it's being suggested to use Bublup for a particular industry or type of person, you get all kinds of ideas and inspiration from this. What else? I've got community in here. So over here, I've got, quick links to, there's 97 and up. And this is actually a folder that I've shared with members of 97 and up. There's the shared folder. And we have some, some resources I put in here, and we just kind of get in here and play around with it. We have a channel for Bublup in Slack, right? So that we, ongoing, we have the conversation. If somebody's playing around with it and has a question, they go into Slack, they ask the question, and here we can play around. We did a call recently where we started going through some people's websites, some of the members' websites. And so I put the links to the websites of the people who volunteered their websites in here. So anybody else who this is shared with can get in here and kind of poke around and get ideas for maybe things they'd like to do for their own website. And I also I'd mentioned this resource, Ahrefs, which is awesome. And Authority One is the site for the guy who designs my website, and actually a couple of our other members now too, because I've referred them. So again, just sharing this with you to feed your mind, feed your brains with ideas for things you can do with Bublup. So back up to community. Here's what I mentioned. Nerds Words is my weekly email. And here are the folders for the recent emails I've sent out. And each one of them has the resources that I shared about. And then I have this folder called Next on Nerds Words, where throughout the week, as I run across resources that I think I might want to share about, I just dump them in here, so that when I sit down to write, I just go here and I say, okay, let me, and sometimes I leave things in here because this particular week, it doesn't fit the subject matter. Otherwise, I might grab one of these and talk about the 10 highest paying degrees for America and Gen Z, right? So that's Nerds Words, right? And this is what I've been linking you all to in each of the weekly emails. So you get access to this. Here's another thing, which I must have just dumped in here, but really it should be there. Let's click on that, move it in. All right, so community for me is just resources. Here I started capturing testimonials that people sent me. This way I have, because sometimes I struggle. I'm like, I've gotten all these testimonials. Some of them are emails, some of them are social media posts, and they come in all different forms. So Bublup is the perfect tool for me to sort of capture these testimonials, and then I can share them with David, my designer, when he's designing a landing page for the website or for a webinar that I'm doing, something like that. Okay. Courses. So content, this is pretty straightforward, but this is where I've got, just, resources that I've clipped that I'm going to use in content that I'm writing, or webinars that I'm producing, right? If I go into webinars, that's where this very webinars folder actually lives. This was last month's catching up with Notion, right? Then I have equipment. So over here, a lot of people ask me, what kind of equipment do you use for this or that? And also just to research, like, like I saw this article, it said Sony's got this $1,400 phone that has a functional tactile design. I'm like, well, that's interesting. And I like reading Ars Technica. They have a lot of good stuff on technology. So I stuck that in here under equipment. So you get the idea, and then just as an example, you can have HR stuff, right? EDD, sick policy, here's referrals, prospects, so legal shit, leadership coaching, so this is like coaching that I've enrolled in, where I'm receiving the coaching. And so I, bookmark some resources here based on my sessions that I have with my coach. So that's, just to give you an idea. And over here, I've just got some generic stuff. This, I just was curious to see what it would look like if I used the mobile app to take a photo of a receipt, right? And there it is. Looks pretty good. So, again, even that, you could have clients upload receipts to a Bublup folder. It might just be easier for them than using whatever app you've been struggling to get them to use to upload receipts, right? You can create a receipts folder inside that client's folder, share it with them, and just give them access to upload, but don't give them access to delete anything, right?
On that note, Seth, you can also scan documents with the mobile app.
I think that's what I did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe this was just a photo, but I remember seeing that. Yeah.
And you can take photos within the Bublup app and set your settings so that it only saves to Bublup and doesn't waste your local storage by saving to your phone as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
there's a lot of customizable settings there.
Right. So how do I access the scan option on the mobile? Because if I hit the plus sign, I don't see it. Or is it only iPhone? I feel like I remember it's only iPhone.
It
That's right.
is. Version 1 was only iPhone.
That's what it
I
is.
guess
All
I
right. That's
shouldn't
what I
say
remember
that.
about it. Yeah. All
I
right.
wanna put the Androids.
Uh, so how do I handle archive or cleanup and Bublup? The answer is based on what I showed you earlier, where you can, select things in bulk and then right click move. So if I wanted to move a whole bunch of these things over, right? I select, drag, click and drag to select, and then I can, drag them all in. So I don't want all these going to the same place, but let's say these are all webinar related items. So they should go into webinar. So I'll click and drag these 3 things. And I'm just going to drag them into, so I know they're going to go under content and into a subfolder called webinars. So I'm going to right click, instead of moving them one place and then moving them again, move to webinars is already there in my recently visited places. So I just select that. And maybe I did something wrong. Maybe you can't. No, I'm sure I've done this with multiple. There it goes. I must have missed it when I went to click it the first time. So now if I go here, right, it's again in the search, I don't even have to type it because I've been there so recently. I can go into webinars and I can find all these items that I just moved are there. So as far as gardening, and that actually was one of the topics that I was planning on talking about here, is that's really the way you're going to want to do it. And what I actually recommend you do in a lot of cases, if you have a lot of stuff that you want to move around or just archive, then open up 2 tabs in Bublup. One tab, open and browse to the location where you want to put it. And then you have the tab where the stuff is that you want to move. Because just by going in a separate tab and opening up that location, it will now show up in those recently accessed places. So it'll make it much easier to right click and then move it.
You can also drag across tabs. I mean, you can have 2 windows open and just drag from this window into that window.
Oh, beautiful. I didn't even think of that. Brilliant. I wouldn't have assumed you could do that because most apps I've tried that with don't let you do that. That's great. That's awesome. Let me just look at the chat here. We can have folder and subfolder in Google Chrome as well. Bookmarks are searchable as well. We can do bookmark. But the problem is Google Chrome is strictly linear. And I know it has a search. I don't think it's as good as having things organized the way I talked about here. But, a lot of these things are going to be strictly up to, your preference. Like I often tell people, what keeps me sober might get you drunk, right? I just think it's a much better way to organize bookmarks to, first of all, give them context. Imagine how clunky your Chrome bookmark structure is going to get if, for example, I need to have a folder for each client, and within that a folder for apps, let's say, and within that a folder for all the different bookmarks for each client. It's just because it's so strictly linear in Chrome or any browser bookmark system, it gets clunky very quickly. Whereas here, I can sort of neatly tuck things away exactly where I need them in context, for example, with that client. So that's the best answer I can give you on why I prefer it, using something like Bublup for this. So again, gardening is just going to be a matter of, multi-selecting, and I love that, Grace, that you can do it across multiple tabs. So I'm sharing my small laptop screen. Normally, I would have the 2 windows up on my 34-inch widescreen, and that'll make it easy to have 2 folders open side by side and just click and drag. Makes it super easy. So should I store sensitive information in Bublup, right? And so I guess this brings us to the security part of our webinar. But maybe before I go here, we want to stop. Grace, you wanted to share with everybody the Teams feature, and then we'll wrap up with the questions about security.
Sure. Yes, I will share my little made up organization that I created for this demo. Okay. So, there is a feature. It is an advanced feature to create an organization. This enables you to have teams like Seth mentioned. So when you're adding people to folders, you can just add a whole team, saves you a lot of time. To create an organization, you can only have one in your account. You would go to this menu here and you would see an option to create an organization. Once it's created, you see it up here. So I named mine my Bublup organization. So now inside this organization, I've already invited a few people. I invited Jessica, our CEO, Kelly from legal, Kevin from marketing, and I invited Seth, who nerd.
Seth from accounting.
Yeah, Seth from accounting. So I've added these people to the folder. You know, I invited them, I gave them, I haven't, at the level of the organization, you're just setting whether someone's an admin or not an admin. So that's, you can see I gave our CEO admin and I gave Seth admin privileges. Then, you know, what you'll see here is if you're in an organization, you'll see this option for teams. So if you click on teams, you can see I've already created a few teams. I created engineering, an HR team, a legal team, a marketing team. So I'm going to go ahead right now and I'm going to create an accounting team. And, you know, I could put a pretty image, I could explain it, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So here we go. Now we have an accounting team, but there's nobody in it. So I'm going to go into this team and I'm going to invite Seth. And I have to type nerd. I can't type today, but there you go, nerd. So I'm going to add him. So now you'll see he is part of the accounting team right here. So you can see here in my made up organization, I've created a few folders. I've got the HR folder, and, you know, I might want everyone to have access to this because we want them to know, you know, the company holidays, the employee handbook. I created a little water cooler chat. If you work from home like I do, sometimes you just want to talk to people about sports or your favorite books or whatever. But then I have these folders here, you know, I have engineering. I only want to invite engineering to this, maybe, you know, I only want to invite the legal team to this one. So I'm going to create a folder for accounting. And I'm not going to give it a pretty picture right now just to save time. And up here, when you click up here to get to your member management, I'm going to toggle this on. Seth's already kind of shown you this, but it's basically saying, I don't want to have the same permissions that I do in my organization. So I'm actually just going to proceed. It's just going to be me. So it just kicked everyone else out of the folder. And now I'm only going to add the accounting team. So I could have had multiple people in that team. It's only Seth for now, but, you know, that could have been 10 people. And I want them to be able to edit. I don't want them to be able to invite anyone. Here we go. So now we see all of a sudden Seth is part of this folder. So I'm going to show you what this looks like to other people. So, you know, we've got accounting, we've got all these folders, and I also have this private folder that I don't want anyone to see except myself. So I'm going to show you another, I'm going to go to my other screen and I have 3 other people open. So I have Kelly from legal over here in this top corner, Kevin from marketing over here, and I've got Jessica, our CEO, down here. And I'm going to show you what it looks like to them. So they've all accepted the invitation to my folder. So they're going to see this little shortcut. By the way, if you're not familiar, you can create a shortcut for any folder into another place. So even though this organization is actually technically in here and this shared with me, it's right here. You know, I made a shortcut. So now it's here. So going to this, you're going to see she doesn't have access to accounting or engineering or marketing or private. So she can't go into these folders. You know, it's going to say you don't have access. But notice that you can see the name. So, you know, you don't want to name this something that could be embarrassing or reveal something about what you don't want other people to see. So, you know, for example, Kevin over here, he can't see this private folder, right? And same for Jessica. Jessica has access to most of the folders, but not private. So let's say we go back to my main folder. Inside private, I want to do a performance review of Kevin. So I can actually create this folder and I can invite, you know, make the permissions different, and I can invite Jessica. And we can talk about whether or not we want to fire Kevin. Kevin won't be able to see that because it's inside of private. But, you know, I wouldn't have wanted to put performance review of Kevin on that top level, because then he might see that and he might get worried or upset. But Jessica here, so she doesn't have access to private, but I did invite her to the folder inside private. So you can see here, she has a separate little shortcut here, and she can go in and she can, you know, performance review of Kevin. She can comment here, like comment at the folder. No, I love Kevin. He's a great worker. Right? And so then we can discuss, you know, private matters in here. So this is just a way to do your folder structure. I think Teams make it easy to be able to invite people, keep your organization well organized. You know, here I get the comment. It's just a good way to structure a company. The other thing is you would only want to have one organization, you know, main account, and that would be the organization that you would set up everything in and, you know, pay for the premium access. And then every member that's part of that folder would gain access to that folder and all the premium benefits. So, you know, for example, in premium, we'll index your PDF documents and things like that, so that to make them searchable. You can search up here, you know, you can see folders, items. You can also search comments. So I can just search, what did Jessica just say? And now I'll see, you know, top comment hits here, and I can click on this and it'll show me her comment. So you can also actually, in this advanced featuring, you can search only within an organization. And I want to say, oh, I only want to see things that Jessica mentioned today, or only things that, you know, only accounting stuff from today in my Bublup organization. And then, you know, it'll give you what you're looking for. So those are some of the advanced features.
Awesome. All right, real quick on security, because I know that's the question that every accountant ever asks about these things. So let me go back to my screen. And so should I store sensitive information? All right, so of course, I always ask the question. When I first talked to my friend Wade at Bublup, I asked him, and the first thing he explained is Bublup uses Amazon Web Services, and the quick answer is Amazon Web Services is very secure, right? Now, I don't take people's word for that, and I don't necessarily assume just because it's Amazon that it's very secure. I, in fact, took the time to research Amazon's security protocols. And of course, as I would have been surprised if they didn't, but they have all the SOC accounting reports, you know, the statement on controls, you know, for the accounting industry standard on security. They have all that. Keep something important in mind always, and this is true of every single app that ever gets created out there. Nothing is completely hack proof, right? There's always the potential for something to be hacked, and it can happen. Heck, it happened to Experian of all companies a few years back, if you remember, right? So anything can be hacked. So what kind of information would you want to store there? I mean, again, it's as far as compliance is concerned, you could put tax returns in Bublup because it's in Amazon Web Services, and those services do conform to the statement on controls for the accounting standards for security, right? And they have a ton of other security protocols for a lot of other industries like banking and FedRAMP and, you know, the Securities and Exchange Commission, all that kind of stuff, right? So the thing that you want to consider, though, especially as many of you know, that a lot of new compliance regs are coming out around like payment information, payment method information. So probably don't put that stuff in here. Probably would be a good idea not to put that stuff in here anyway, right? So you wouldn't want to put, you know, like somebody's credit card number and expiration and all that in here. But things like bank and credit, bank statements and credit card statements and invoices and that kind of information, I would say, yeah, you're good to go. You can keep that stuff in there, right? Organizing your documents and files in Bublup, strategies for tagging. So the first rule of tags in Bublup is you can't tag folders. I mentioned that earlier. You can tag anything else by right-clicking an item and choosing tags and then type away. You saw me demonstrate that a little while ago. Here's what it looks like on a search. So when you're searching for something, you can see I have tags for things. I have a tag for Katrina. Look at that. Over here. So tagging effectively will help you find things later. That's the main strategy around it, is using tags effectively so that you can find things regardless of what folder they're in. And as I say here, a good combination of well-organized folders, well-named items in Bublup, plus a great tagging system will go a long way to making sure that you're optimized for retrieval, which I talked about earlier. And, you know, so if you have a folder for something, you probably don't need a tag for it. tags should be for more broad things, like I said earlier, that run across multiple clients and folders, right? And remember that the search is not just, for when you're not sure where something is, it's also a much faster way to get there sometimes than browsing through the whole structure, right? So you want to get yourself in the habit of using the search a lot. And here's an example of what I was talking about earlier with respect to naming things well. You see how this makes it super clear? Because I have two clients that use Chase Bank. One is Discount Printing, one is First Factory. So this, even though it's in the breadcrumbs are smaller. I'm very, very, ADD and not paying attention half the time and moving very quickly. So I like having it in nice big print. It just makes it so clear. I search for Chase, that word gets bolded everywhere or highlighted, and I can see very clearly, which of these two clients it is that I need to click on based on, whose Chase account I'm searching for. We talked about collaborating and sharing. I showed you all of this. This is where you can click on the little icons for people to access the folder sort of sharing settings once it's been shared with somebody. Here are the two ways you can share something when you right click, is you can either click share or you can click copy shareable link. The difference is if you click copy shareable link, it's going to give you a quick dialogue with the link, and also it's got a couple social icons there. When you click the first share, I think it gives you more options in terms of what you want to share and how, and whether you want to invite somebody or get a public link, or that's the distinction between the two. Next, gardening, I kind of talked to you about it, right? So the idea here is, and here I'm giving you an example in the screenshot of where you can multi-select. This is exactly what I illustrated earlier, where you can multi-select and then you can quickly move them all to the appropriate place. And as we've now learned, this is why I'm glad we have Grace here, because we've now learned you can drag them across multiple browser windows. So that brings us to the end. And I promised you that there would be two things essentially. Grace is going to have a coupon code for you to get. It's a free month of Pro, Grace?
Yes.
Okay. So she's going to give me that code and I'm going to share it with you. I'll email it out. I'll also include it when I post the replay up on the Guide to the Galaxy blog. I will be sharing with you this link to, actually, it's a different link than this, to join 97 and Up and take advantage of the deal I have where you can try it for 30 days for free. And then if you choose to stay with it, then it'll renew at $147 a month instead of $197 a month. And as I mentioned earlier, in addition to many other resources, we have Bublup resources there in 97 and Up. So if you're, if you've watched this and you feel like it was a bit like drinking from the garden hose and you really want to know that you have a resource to go to get clarification on things, Grace is going to be joining us in our Slack workspace and kind of owning our Bublup channel a little bit, so she can be there to answer your questions, which is awesome and very generous. So thank you for that, Grace. And I will, like I said, email everybody a follow-up probably tomorrow, letting you know, A, that the replay is live, and B, giving you the links that you need to take advantage of these two offers. And if anybody still has questions, I'll stick around for a little bit longer.
Yeah, thank you so much for hosting this. I totally agree. It is like drinking straight from the garden hose sometimes. I mean, there are features that half of our own company don't know about because there's just so many. There's a plethora of advanced features. Like, we try to keep it simple, at its base, it's a cloud storage app, but if you want it to be more, it can be a lot more. So we have a lot of good resources at bublup.com/support. You can email support. You might get a hold of me. If you do, say hi. And I'm happy to join your Slack conversation and try to help out if anyone has any questions.
Awesome. Does anybody have any questions? I think we addressed all the ones that were in the Q&A.
Hi, I'm not able to type in Q&A, but does Bublup and 1Password integrate? Like, can we use 1Password within Bublup?
Well, what are you like envisioning about that? Like, because
like, you went to the client's page where you had links to their Capital One account or whatever. If I have those passwords saved in 1Password, would it? You
could probably link to where that password's and where that login's information is in 1Password.
Okay.
That's how I would envision doing something like that. Like when it comes to that, like I use Dashlane, it's a very similar tool. I have the extension installed in my browser. So as soon as I click the link that I would have bookmarked in Bublup, the extension for Dashlane is going to pick up the site and just get me logged in. So
okay.
I would assume 1Password does something similar. Yeah, by the way, if you're if you're on the panel here, you don't have access to the Q&A because theoretically you'd be answering questions, not asking them. It's one of the weird twists on inviting you all as panelists. So you can use the chat, but you can also just unmute. And sorry if it got a little noisy. My gardeners came during the webinar. Usually they come more like 3:30 in the afternoon. Today they showed up early and drove my dogs crazy. So I hope that wasn't too annoying.
We couldn't hear anything.
Oh, good. See?
And in addition to any questions, I've been taking notes of things mentioned in the chats. Feature requests. If you guys have certain features that you're thinking you would like, you can mention them now, or you can also, we have a feature request button on our site. But I've tried to keep track of what you guys have mentioned to bring to my design team.
I'll save the chat, Grace, and I'll send it to you so you can review for anything.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we got some great feedback too. A lot of people love the email feature, the forwarding of the emails, and I think we sold Dominique on it.
Yeah, a lot of helpful questions there.
Yep. Great. So again, you know where to find us if you have any questions. Grace will be invited to Slack ASAP, and then so you can ask the questions in there, those of you in 97 and up. And like I said, I'll send a follow-up email to everybody who is registered with all the links and resources that you need in order to get any follow-up questions answered. All right. Thank you, everyone.